Hi there, welcome to this build or build blog of a Model L, a lovely design by Peter Fisher from 1973. Now originally this was free flight and we've converted it to radio assist, so just a couple of channels for the rudder and the elevator. It's a really nice design, and in the last video I did, it was kind of almost finished really, the bulk construction of this model. So now I've got a load of planing to do, you can see here, and a load of sanding to get this model ready to be covered. And if you can see here, I've started, this is just a test wing from an old plane that I crashed a long time ago, but I've kept one of the wings as a test bed. And you can see I've got some laminating film on this, and I've got some silk which I've dyed teal, and that is, I think, going to be the predominant colour on this model, but I'm still playing about with that while I'm doing the preparation. And what I'm doing is I'm just planing these trailing edges, getting them ready to sand, and there's a lot of sanding to be done. There's some, you know, you can see the corners haven't been done, there's still bulk lumps of balsa there. These planes, the David plane, is fantastic at doing this kind of stuff. It is just, as long as you've got a nice sharp blade, it just comes off lovely. I mean, just look at these pieces that are coming off. They're paper thin, in fact they're thinner than paper, and just really nice to use. And what I've done is I've put on some masking tape along here, along the top of the ribs, and I never used to do that, and if you've ever used the plane to do this kind of work, you'll know that occasionally you'll catch a rib and do a little bit of damage if you're not careful. So more recently I've started putting this masking tape, it's just decorator's masking tape, and I put it on the ribs like that, and I will leave that on now until I've actually got this more or less profiled. I will even leave it on as I'm doing the sanding, because again, the last thing I want to be doing is sanding this and finding I'm catching the ribs or sanding the ribs down. So anyway, I thought we'd have a quick look at that, and I'm going to get on now and get this done. Once I've got these trailing edges to do, I've more or less done that back edge there. It's you can't get the plane in here to do these bits, so that'll have to be sanded, and I'm working on this now. Once I've done that, I'm going to do these leading edges and just take off the point there on that 1/4 inch square, and then sand these to profile. And I'm dead excited to start to get this covered, but we'll have a look at this in a bit. Right, well, I've now got this finished and this wing is ready to cover, and I am so pleased to get these wing tips. They're just lovely and shaped and smooth and contoured and just right. I mean, it's really important at this stage that we get it right, because any imperfections, any high spots on these spars, as soon as we start covering, are going to stand out like a sore thumb, and then it'll be too late really to go back unless we start stripping off the covering. So we really do want to get it right now. Now initially I go over it with an 80 grit paper. Now that's pretty coarse, but I've been using this 80 grit for probably over 12 months, so it isn't really like a fresh 80 grit, so it doesn't do any damage. So I take off the high spots, get it more or less right, and then I use I think this is 240 grit, which gets it really nice and smooth. I think on the back there, I think that's something like a 360 or something, but I don't think that's really necessary. I think the 240 gets it just where we want. I mean, that feels really, really smooth. Now, I know some people use they'll either put dope on it or sanding sealer, that's the word I was thinking for. But I don't put anything on this before I cover it. All I do is I get my workshop vacuum, which is really strong, and I just give it a really good vacuum to get all that dust off and all those loose, put that down, all those loose bits of balsa, because that will prevent it from sticking or make it harder to stick. Now, this hasn't got an undercamber. If it had an undercamber, then I might think of just treating those bottom edges there, just to make sure they hadn't got any dust or anything on them. But I really don't think it needs treating, and I never have done. Well, not for the last 45 years anyway. I think I did when I was a kid. Now, I've got the fuselage to work on. I've still got some coarse sanding down the sides and the bottom with this old 80 grit, and then we can work down to the 240. It's really important at this stage to make sure that these formers aren't sticking proud, or the stringers aren't sticking proud. I put a little bit of filler. I hardly ever use filler, but just where I've done the sheeting here, there's a little bit of a dip between the former and the sheeting, so I've just put a little bit on and I'm waiting for that to dry. But I can't wait to get this done now and start covering. Anyway, once we've got it completely sanded and ready, we'll come back and we'll have a look. Well, I've now got this totally finished and ready to start covering. And you know, there's something really magical about getting it all sanded so it's lovely and smooth and profiled. It's just a really kind of exciting stage in a build, and I'm really looking forward to starting to cover this. Now, the only thing that will probably need a little bit of finishing is this fin, and I won't do that until I've actually got the tailplane stuck in place and I know exactly how it's going to fit, where it's going to fit and the shape it should be. It's interesting that when I did the rudder, the smooth transition from the back of the fuselage in the shape of the rudder wasn't quite right, and I had to stick a little bit of balsa on the bottom of the fuselage and reshape it, because those kind of lines just have to flow through and look right. So what I'm going to be doing now, let's put this back on for effect. So there we go. What I'm going to be doing now, or at some point fairly soon, is starting to cover the wings. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to be fuel proofing around the engine bay. And that's really important that we do that before we start covering, so that the edges of the film have fuel proofing going underneath them. So it's a really good kind of seam overlap, if you like, to stop the ingress of fuel, because this is going to be an oily diesel engine that's going to throw oil all over my new model, but you know, that's fine. But we want to make sure that it's well sealed. I see so many models these days, particularly ARFs, that aren't fuel proofed, and you know, if you have a fuel leak or you've got a messy engine like a diesel on the front, then you really do need a fuel proofing. So I'm going to get the wings done, and just as a little bit of a teaser, I've been doing a bit more work on the covering, and this is my test wing. I just do various things with this, testing out different tissues and silk, and these are russet and teal, and those are the two colours I'm going to be using. This is silk that I've dyed, and that is going to be the colour scheme for this. Now, I've got something in mind, but I won't share that today. You'll have to wait for an updated video. But hopefully you've enjoyed seeing this come together. I'm going to pull this video to a close now, and I really am feeling quite excited about getting this done. And you can see, if I turn this around, I've even got those kind of very typical Fisher sort of characteristic window bars there on the front. So anyway, hope you've enjoyed watching this. Thanks very much.